Hello everyone and welcome to ClydeCast, my weekly podcast where I talk about things going on in the NBA, the NFL, or really just sports in general. And this week we are talking about NBA free agency. The date that I am recording this, it is July 5th. And at this point, all of the big name free agents have already signed onto teams, and in this episode, we're going to be talking about all the free agents that decided to leave their current teams. So that's why those four players are on your screen right now: Marco Bellinelli, Monte Ellis, LaMarcus Aldridge, and DeAndre Jordan. So what we're going to be doing in this episode is that I'm going to take 10 of the free agents that decided to leave their current teams, 10 of the guys that I thought were really interesting players, and I'm going to rate them from the guy that I think will have the least impact on his team to the guy that I think will have the best impact on his team and maybe even revamp the franchise. So all of you are probably wondering who those 10 players are, and I have them right here in no particular order. They are LaMarcus Aldridge, Wesley Matthews, Monte Ellis, DeAndre Jordan, Tyson Chandler, Rajon Rondo, Paul Pierce, Marco Bellinelli, Greg Monroe, and Damari Carroll. And while I'm talking about this, I'm going to have some NBA Blacktop playing in the background, and it's just those 10 players playing 5-on-5. But before I get into this, remember that at the end of this video, you can go into the comments section below and put your ratings for those 10 players and put them in order and how you see fit. So starting off the list, I have Marco Bellinelli at number 10. He recently signed with the Kings for a 3-year, $19 million deal. I have no idea why the Kings gave him so much money, and this is my reason for it. I always thought that Bellinelli was one of those guys that always benefited from the Spurs system. We all know that the Spurs play great team basketball, but when you look at the way that Bellinelli fit into their scheme, they would always be setting picks for him. They would always try to get him open for three, because we know Bellinelli is deadly from the three-point line, but that type of play only works when you're on a team that's really all about team basketball, and they're willing to set up plays for you, even though you're a guy coming off the bench. And if you're a team like the Kings and you have players like DeMarcus Cousins, Ben McLemore, Darren Collison, and now Rajon Rondo, who we're going to talk about later, all of those guys are going to want the ball in their hands. They're not going to want to set up plays for some guy coming off the bench to shoot some three-pointers. I'm not saying that Bellinelli is a bad player. He's a really good shooter. He can spread the floor, but a guy like that only really works out in the perfect set. I thought that he should have stayed with the Spurs. I felt like he worked perfectly in their system. On the Kings, I think he'll make his three-pointers. He'll get his statistics, but he's not going to be the player that's going to lead the Kings to the playoffs. So next up, at number 9, I have Damari Carroll, the small forward that is leaving the Atlanta Hawks and instead going to the Toronto Raptors. Carroll isn't much of an offensive threat. He plays really good defense, but he's not going to be the starter on the Raptors. They have Terrence Ross, who's a great player. He's been on the team a couple years, so he knows the system well. He's going to be the starter. Carroll will come off the bench. He'll play some nice defense, but like Marco Bellinelli, he's not going to be that key factor that's going to lead the Raptors to a deep playoff run. Moving up to number 8, I have Tyson Chandler. I remember when Tyson Chandler first signed with the New York Knicks, I was so excited. He's a great defensive player. He won the championship with the Mavericks a couple years ago. And now Chandler is leaving the Mavericks and he's staying in the West Coast, going to the Phoenix Suns. The Suns are in desperate need of some big men. They're pretty much set in their backcourt with Eric Bledsoe and Brandon Knight, but right now I think their starting center is Alex Len, who hasn't really proven himself yet in the league. Chandler will be a nice fit in Phoenix. The Suns need some big men that can play defense, and he will definitely play that role, and I would rate him higher, but since he's playing in the Western Conference, that's a really tough conference to play in. It's way better than the East. I think the Suns will get maybe the 7th spot in the playoffs next year, but that's not a big improvement for them. Going over to number 7, I have Rajon Rondo, and I bet a lot of you expected me to rate him higher on this list, and the whole reason why I put him only at number 7 was because he only signed a 1-year deal with the Kings. I think that's a sign that he's not looking to stay in Sacramento. I think what he's trying to do with this Kings team is that he's going to go to the Kings, be one of the best players on that team to kind of show out and get a lot of teams interested in him. That way, next offseason, when he's a free agent again, a lot of teams will look back at his plays with the Kings, they'll be interested in him, and then he can get some big money next offseason when he's looking for a new team. And for that reason, I have him pretty low on this list. I don't think he's going to go all out for the Kings and try to win them a playoff spot. I think he's going to be more focused on getting his numbers. That way, next offseason, a lot of better teams will be interested in him, and then he can go to a better team. So standing at number 6, I have Monte Ellis. I'm going to be honest and say that I've never been a big Monte Ellis fan. I think he's more focused on just getting his numbers, getting his money, and he's not really a guy that's that focused on winning. In the offseason, he left the Dallas Mavericks to go to the Indiana Pacers. He will be in Indiana playing with Paul George coming off his leg injury this past year, and I think that system could work out under one circumstance. Monte Ellis will want to be the star of that team, and if that team is going to succeed, he's going to need to accept the fact that Paul George is the star there. He's the face of the Pacers, and if the Pacers want to be the team that they once were a couple years ago, Monte Ellis is going to need to accept that and take the role of Paul George's sidekick. Now at number 5, I have Wesley Matthews, who is leaving the Portland Trail Blazers and going to the Dallas Mavericks. Matthews is a little bit of an iffy player. I think he tore his ACL this past year in the NBA, so you don't know how he's going to recover from that, so that's why I don't have him higher on the list, but at the same time, he can stretch the floor. He's a decent shooting guard in the league, but right now in the NBA, we are at a time where there aren't that many great shooting guards. You have guys like Kobe and Dwayne Wade that are good, but they just aren't as good as they once were. So getting a guy like Wesley Matthews, who is an above-average shooting guard, is still a pretty big deal for the Dallas Mavericks. Going on to number 4, I have Greg Monroe, who decided to leave the Detroit Pistons and sign with the Milwaukee Bucks. Knowing that the Knicks and the Lakers both offered him max contracts, it's pretty surprising to see that Greg Monroe passed up on those two opportunities to play for great organizations to go to Milwaukee for some reason. The Bucks need a center like Greg Monroe at this time. Larry Sanders walked away from the game this year, and the Bucks traded away Ersan Ilyasova, their starting power forward, so they need a guy like Greg Monroe to get some rebounds, put up some points, and then they also have a nice team around him that they're still developing, guys like MCW and the Greek Freak. I'm just saying it right now, keep an eye on the Bucks for the next couple of years, because I think they're going to be a really good team down the road. So now we are at the top 3. At the number 3 spot, I have Paul Pierce, and I know a lot of you didn't see that coming. He went from the Washington Wizards to the Los Angeles Clippers, and I can honestly say that I think the Clippers are the best fit for Paul Pierce at this time. He's approaching the end of his career. The Clippers recently got Lance Stevenson, and I know they lost DeAndre Jordan. Looking at their lineup right now, they are basically set at every position except center. They have Chris Paul at point guard, who's easily a top 3 point guard in the entire league. Lance Stevenson, who could prosper now that he's not the main focus on that team. Then they have Paul Pierce at small forward, who proved to us in the playoffs that while he is older, he still has it. Then at power forward, you have Blake Griffin dunking over people left and right. All you need to do now is find that one key piece to put at center, and I think that team could make it to the NBA Finals. So going up to the number 2 spot, I have DeAndre Jordan, who left the Los Angeles Clippers to go to the Dallas Mavericks. Looking back at free agency, when I heard that DeAndre Jordan was a free agent, I honestly thought that he was going to go back to the Clippers. I don't see a reason why he left the Clippers in the first place. He was a perfect fit for that team, but I think it will still work out for him in Dallas. He's going to be playing alongside Dirk Nowitzki, so that's kind of like the relationship that Dirk and Tyson Chandler had, where you have Nowitzki producing all of the offense, and then DeAndre Jordan will be there to be your main defensive force. So now we are at the number 1 spot, but before we get into that, I'm going to recap at numbers 10 through 2. At number 10, I had Marco Bellinelli. 9, I had DeMarre Carroll. 8 was Tyson Chandler. 7, Rajon Rondo. 6 was Monte Ellis. 5, Wesley Matthews. 4, Greg Monroe. 3, Paul Pierce, 2, DeAndre Jordan, and now at number 1, I have LaMarcus Aldridge going from the Portland Trail Blazers to the San Antonio Spurs. Aldridge will be a perfect fit with the Spurs. He'll be playing alongside Tim Duncan. Tim Duncan is obviously approaching the end of his career. We all know that before Tim Duncan retires, he's going to mentor LaMarcus Aldridge and make sure that Aldridge knows what he's doing with the San Antonio Spurs. That way, when Tim Duncan retires, Aldridge will be able to become the new leader of that team and hopefully lead them to a couple more championships. Anyways, I hope you guys had a fun time watching this video. Now be sure to go into the comments section below and rate those 10 players for me. I can't wait to see what you guys come up with. I'll be sure to put those 10 players on the screen right now. Anyways, I hope you guys had a fun time watching this video. Be sure to have a great day. God bless you guys. Bye.